Kelly, welcome to the show. So happy to have you on. Look forward to chatting with you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this, Brian.
Yeah, definitely. And you have, before we dive into all the awesome things you're doing in the business world, you've started several businesses over the last 25 years, but you didn't, you weren't born that way, right? So
No.
there's a, there's a story there. And, just share with the listeners, before we get to your W-2 prison break story, what you were doing before that, and then we'll talk about how you were able to get out of that situation. Then I want to definitely hear about how you started these businesses, and we'll dive in a little bit further there.
Okay. Well, great. I want to start by saying I didn't start my entrepreneurial journey. I didn't start my first business till I was 36. And so I had worked for the same company for 14 years. Before I started my first business, but I had always dreamed of being an entrepreneur. Like when I was 17 and was in DECA, I was in, the contests for business plans. And like, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, was to be a business owner. And I remember interviewing a bridal boutique owner, about how she built her business. And, I'm 17 years old and just like, oh, she completely, runs the show. She's in total control of her life. This is what I want to do with my life. Well, then life happens, right? Different things had come up. I moved out of the house when I was just had turned 18, was putting myself through school, fell into a job. Well, let me back up. I worked for 1 year at a company called GTE Directories. So this is going to really date me, which was already done when we talked about 25 years of entrepreneurship. But uh, it was selling yellow page ads. So for those of
Nice.
you listening, there used to be a book that we had that had ads, in it for companies, local companies. And that's what I did. And I went through training. They sent me, for 4 weeks of training. And I knew at week 3 of training that I hated the work. I was like, I do not want to do this, but I made a commitment and I didn't want to look like I was jumping around. So I'm like, I will do this for 1 year and I'll learn everything I can. And then I'll make a move. I'm not sure what that'll be. Well, it was the most miserable year of my life. And on the 1 year mark, again, dating myself here, I went to the newspaper under the employment section, and I applied for a position through the newspaper.
Yeah.
And that was my job with a staffing firm that I worked at for almost 14 years before I left to start my own business. And I knew by day 2 that I had found, like, I'm like, that I love this work. Like, I love helping people. I love the impact that getting somebody in the right career and in the right job has on somebody's life, and how that ripples out into their family, their community. You all know, if you're in a job that you're miserable in, it impacts every area of your life.
So
So
true.
I loved that kind of work. I loved being able to help people and get them lined up in their right position. So, year 10, and I've got a mentor that I'm working with, and we're having the same conversation where I'm like, oh, I've got this desire to go, like, I love this work, but I could do it so much better. Like, I could take the best of this business, the recruiting business, and the human part of it and what I love to do. And I know I could do it better on my own.
Hmm.
And so these thoughts were going through my mind. And I had this mentor, and we're having the same conversation. We had a monthly lunch where we would sit down together. And he said, Kelly, you have this same conversation. We sit down and we have this very same conversation every month. And he said, let me ask you a question. He said, how would you feel if we were having this very same conversation 3 years from now? And the first thing that the first word that came to mind was disappointed, that I would be disappointed in myself if 3 years from now we were having the same conversation. And he goes, well, if not now, when? When are you going to make this move and do it? And so it was like that cold glass of water or proverbial like bitch slap that I needed to start to make a change and start to make those little incremental steps so that I was ready to transition into doing this on my own and starting my own recruiting firm, which is what I ended up doing in 2008. So
it's a good time to start a business.
Yeah, it was. I cried almost every other day on my way home because I rented space. We did everything, and I went into it with my business partner. We left the company we worked at and we started it together. Mm-hmm. And it was in the depth of the recession. Nobody was hiring. I mean, everybody was hiring. And, what was really interesting was that the company we were working for we had sat down with us and said, hey, we're going to have to lay off. We just want to make sure that you're all in and committed before we lay off other individuals, because I'd been there for so long. Mm-hmm. And obviously we had been impacted tremendously by what was going on. And we said, well, actually, we've got office space rented in 2 months from now. We were planning on leaving. And so the wheels started in motion more quickly, gave my 30-day notice and was on my own. And then sat in that office space. I was lucky. I started with somebody and we did our exit interview in the morning at the company. Mm-hmm. And in the afternoon, we were sitting in our new office space and we both just kind of looked at each other. We're like, now what? You know what I mean? So anyway, that's kind of my trajectory and my story of how I started, or kind of the catalyst for starting my first business.
I love that story. So, I mean, you were, I took down some notes here. I'm going to just unpack it a little bit. So entrepreneur at heart, 17 years old, you're interviewing people and asking about business. So it was in you, just took you a while to get there. I love the yellow book, and it's really kind of disappointing that they don't send that to the house anymore. They used to mail it. They used to mail it every whatever it was once a year, and don't get that anymore.
Nope.
No, but the comment you made about your mentor, and I'm going to bring great stuff. I mean, you obviously found. How did you find your mentor?
So this was actually somebody who I had found. She was my DECA. I was introduced to him through my DECA teacher in high school.
Got it.
And so he was just a business owner, a influential business owner. He's since passed away, and his name was Ralph Pullman. And then he actually was somebody who was connected to the staffing firm that I started working for back in 1995.
Excellent. So you're having lunch with Ralph once a month, and he asks you this just awesome question, basically like, mm-hmm. What are you doing? Why are we coming here? Why are we coming here? How would you feel in 3 years? If he didn't ask you that question, do you think you would have started the business?
I would have eventually. Like I'm a firm believer in like the without getting too woo or anything like that, like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And what, the path that you're walking is exactly the one that you're supposed to walk. And I think this path to entrepreneurship, whether it was him saying that, something else, I'm also into a lot of how our brains work. And like my reticular activating system, that really is kind of your filter for your life, was like honed in on this dream that I had. So it was looking for ways to bring this into my life. And so I think it would have eventually, I would have eventually gotten there, but it was, like I said, that cold glass of water and that thing that I needed to hear that helped, that really was that catalyst. And if it wasn't that, it probably would have been something else in another conversation up the road. But yeah.
Right. Right. No, excellent. You definitely attracted it into your life. Okay, so you're in '08 and you're in the office and nobody's hiring, everybody's firing. So, I mean, give us kind of the short version of what happened next. And I mean, because obviously it worked. You have a successful
Yep.
staffing company. So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more. And maybe, well, let me just back up a second too. When you left the job, the staffing company, what was that like? I mean, was that because when I left my job, I had all these fears circling around what they were going to say. Like I was scared to tell them I was leaving, and just because I'd been there for so long. I mean, did you have similar emotions around that, and how did that conversation go?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had the utmost respect for these women. They were two franchise owners
Hmm.
that I worked for who had taken really good care of me. I had learned a lot from. Um, I had stopped growing though years before. Like I should have left at least 2 or 3 years before I did, because I was on autopilot. I didn't even have to think about what I was doing. It was just, I literally, it was like Groundhog's Day every day, you know?
Yeah,
And so but I am an extremely loyal person. And I knew the impact that me leaving, and that's not, I don't mean that to sound egotistical or anything, but I knew what an integral part I was. I ran their business for them, and how that was going to impact them and how it was going to change their lives, because
yeah,
they were in the optimal situation where they were just checking in and doing their own thing as entrepreneurs. They didn't have to work in the day to day. And I knew that this change was going to bring them back into the business, which wasn't necessarily something that they wanted.
mm,
But um, this is really interesting. So I felt an extreme sense of loyalty, sick, leading up to the few days leading up to when I finally decided to, like, literally have a physiological response to having to have this conversation and just feeling sick to my stomach, you know, because I knew and I cared about them. Here's the thing, though, that I'd like to say. Uh, I learned something the hard way through that whole experience. And that is that it's business. Um, it, I was replaceable. You know what I mean? Putting my dreams on hold to stay, and like their their care and concern and love for me was connected to the value that I brought to their organization. As soon as I was no longer bringing value to the organization because I was leaving, it was, um, we're done.
right.
You know, I spent a month there and, you know, wrapping things up and everything, and they were great, but it's business, you know, and I think we sometimes have this false sense of loyalty, and think that, oh, you know, it's really going to be a bad thing for this company if I leave. You know, be careful about letting your ego get in the way. And I think, you know, Brian, sometimes too, our brains, and one of the businesses that I'm involved in is a company called Think It Be It, and it's a human performance, human behavior company, and we work on mindset, and there's a lot of things that we talk about with the brain. One of the things that you need to understand about your brain is it's got two jobs: efficiency and safety. And so when you're thinking about leaving a job that you've been at for a while, right away, it's already creating, like, when we're just thinking about efficiency, think about all of the change and how hard your brain is going to have to work to learn something new, to get into a new. So it's like starts to put the brakes up a little bit for you, like, oh, you know, whether you realize this is happening or not, it's happening in the background. And then just the whole idea of change and being uncomfortable. Its job is to keep you safe and cozy. Leaving your safe comfort zone is a threat as far as your brain is concerned. It's like, whoa, wait a minute here. And so be aware that those are some of the things that were happening. Like the excuses I was making for staying um, weren't really valid excuses. They were ways that my brain was kind of throwing up some of those obstacles to keep me in my safe little place.
Yeah.
And so that was a hard lesson for me to learn after I gave notice, was that this was business. It was a transaction. They were paying me to do a job, and I did that job, and I brought value. And so I don't know. How do you feel about when I say
That
that,
is
Brian?
just, I'm so glad we're having this conversation that you explained it in that way. And thank you for being vulnerable as well. People need to hear this because you are expendable. It is business. And, you know, you disrupted their situation by leaving. And look, life goes on without Kelly. Life goes on without Brian. I used to think that. I'm like, well, if I leave, the company's going to implode, you know? And they were like, hey, my situation was a little bit different. They said, look, we support you. We think you're making a great job. We think you're making a great decision. Obviously, we want you to stay, but you got to chase your dreams too, which floored me because I thought they were gonna. I was like you. I was sick to my stomach. I was having call reluctance. I can't call them up. So it was a very similar situation. And again, I created this whole thing in my head, and I think it, like you had said, it was really related to me trying to talk myself into staying.
Yep.
And we as humans are very good at that. We can talk ourselves into anything, we can talk ourselves out of anything. And it's easier to stay in the job. And my mentor, one of the help that I got from my mentor, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I ever received from anyone was the job is the risk. Like if you stay
Yes.
there, you're at risk. Like the insurance, the benefits, the steady paycheck, like that's not a benefit. That all that stuff is you're just making it up in your head.
Mhm.
They can let you go at any time. And I fortunately survived 3 rounds of layoffs after '08, but I easily could have been let go easily. I was a salesperson, and when they fired the salespeople, the whole company's going out of business. But
Exactly. You know what's
yeah,
happening next.
but no, really, really, really great share. I love that. And okay, so you're back to your staffing company. So how did you build that during that time frame? Because that must have been just a super challenging time to do anything.
It was. And I'll tell you a couple of different things. So I was, I don't know whether fortunate enough is the right word, but I'd been through the recession that came. So in the staffing industry, I'd been through the recession that came with 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd been through the recession that at the beginning of the recession, as we were 2007, 8, moving into 9, I'd been part of that. Like, so I knew what worked to get us out of the recession after 9/11. And so the other thing too, I had a safety net as far as money was concerned, and like I was getting down to like um, rationing shampoo. You know what I mean? Like the shampoo that I loved, like making sure that I was only using a little bit or not, like there were sacrifices that had to be
Mm-hmm.
made for sure so that I was able to make this move because I planned on not having any income for the first 12 months. So because of the time that we were in and nobody was hiring.
Yeah.
So here's what we did. We chose to utilize that time to build relationships. To I knew what had worked in my former roles, and we decided to immerse ourselves in one organization, American Council of Engineering Companies, because our staffing and recruiting firm was focused on engineering professionals. And we showed up at everything that they had, gave any expertise that we had. There were some people who were nice enough that took us under their wing and taught us the ropes as far as the engineering, just that business is concerned and the organization. We just kept making the calls. We kept taking all of the right actions, knowing that when the faucet turned back on, that it eventually would turn back on. And if we did all of the right things, we would be setting ourselves up for success. And that's exactly what happened. So it was 2 years. So it was like 11 months before we made our first dollar.
Mm.
And then Uh, Year two, we were fully supporting ourselves and had replaced our W-2 income.
Beautiful.
Year three, 150% increase, 450% increase. By year five, we were grossing 8 figures. So it was relationship. We had a laser focused mission on, it was just like, do the right things, just make a little progress each day. And we're not going to measure our success by the number of jobs we get in, or we're going to measure our success by the number of meaningful conversations we have with people and by how many people we add to our network. And because otherwise it would have been so discouraging and disheartening had we not figured out that we just had success had to look different, and we had to reframe that so that we could keep our mindset in the right place. And to listen, we were listening to Tony Robbins. We started the first hour of our day listening to something growth oriented and positive, because it's hard being told no all day long, every day, and then, again, I was lucky enough to go into this with a business partner that I trusted. I mean, we worked together for 10 of those 14 years that I was at the company. So we, when one of us needed to be picked up and help dusting off, we had that support system. So that was another thing that was really helpful. And whether it's somebody that you have actually in the business with you, or whether it's somebody you have in your life, I think that's a really important part of being successful in doing this, is having that support system. But that's really how we did it. We were like, what are the right things to be doing right now? And then let's do those things.
You make it sound so simple. I know it was hard. I know it was difficult. Everything you just described was, I mean, I don't know what, you probably know the percentage of people who would have quit after 11 months or even sooner than that. And, I'm so glad you shared like the growth after 3, 4, and 5, 8 figures after 5 years. For those of you listening out there, what sacrifices would you make if you knew you could do that in 5 years? And I assume that was probably in you and your business partner's plan. You thought you could get there at some point, and you did. So other than the positive reinforcement that you took on a daily basis, because again, you were basically getting slapped in the face every single day for it sounds like for a year.
Yes.
That's tough. That's tough to do. I mean, that I could see why someone would be like, oh, why did I leave my job? I was getting paid and nobody was bothering me. It was on autopilot. So what are some of the other things that you did to get through that? Because it sounds like a challenging time for you and your partner.
It was the hardest time of my life, and I joked, it's not that far. It probably wasn't every other day, but there was at least a couple of drive home a week where it was, like, did I do the right thing? And I'm lucky I have a really supportive husband who was like, you've got this, anything you've ever set your mind to doing, you've done. So just keep doing the right things. And, but for me, I'll be really, just 100% transparent. I had to take care of myself. So it was fitness. I start my day, so like I have a fitness routine, I have, and that started at the beginning of my journey. I've always been athletic and played soccer and all of that, but I started running at the beginning of this journey. And part of it was just like, I needed a release for all of the stress. And then it just turned into something that is a major part of my life. And when I feel strong physically, I feel strong mentally. And for me, taking care of my body and my health was really, I think if I wouldn't have been in optimal condition from a mindset standpoint, mental health, because this was a mind F, I'm getting into this. So, if I hadn't been doing some of those things or integrated more of that into my routine, I don't know whether I would have gotten through it. Honestly, I might have given up, but I found strength and peace of mind through my workout routine, if that makes any sense.
It totally does. I mean, I think prioritizing your health and your fitness is super important. Otherwise, you won't have the ability to manage a business, let alone multiple businesses. So you got to prioritize that. And I know that you do, and I wish more people would do it because I really, it's easy to, just kind of go through the motions, the 9 to 5 and, oh, I'm too tired. I'm too tired. Well, there's a reason you're too tired.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're not,
Absolutely. And I think too, here's another thing, I think with health and, people always tie it to like losing weight or, and for me, it was about how can I be the best version of myself and show up as the best version of myself? Because here's the thing,
mm,
being a business owner, it doesn't matter what business you're in marketing. So you have got to, the energy you put out is exactly what you get back. And so to be able to sustain and maintain an energy that's how we grew the business. We were great at building relationships. And so when the faucet turned back on, it came on with a gush because we did all of that work and we were a positive um, influence in their life. We were always positive when we were talking to them. We were always, and you've got to be able to um, business ownership, growing a successful business, it's about energy. And I mean that physically and metaphysically. It's like the energy you put out is what you get back. So if you're super stressed on that call with, a prospect, or you're always worried about losing a client, or
mhm.
then they feel that.
Yeah.
And nothing stinks more than, we always would joke and say, desperation is a stinky cologne. So it's like, what can you do to optimize your health so that you can show up as the best version of yourself? Because if you do that, then you're going to get the outcomes. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
inevitable. It will come as a result of that. And if you don't have your health, like nothing else matters. So,
Totally agree. I mean,
yep.
you want to be around for all the rewards, right? And
Yeah.
for your family or for whatever else that's important to you, the reason that you're doing this,
Yep.
which I wanted to ask you, I don't mean to get personal here. I mean, I'm sure there's a strong why behind why you did what you did and what you went through. And I'd love to hear you share that with everyone.
Yeah. So I think a couple of different things. And I think for me, it started with family and it started with loss, and losing Ben to cancer. He was 17 and I was 18, and then having an older brother who battled addiction all through that time frame. And so I think for me, it was always and then having experienced other loss, it's like life is precious. You know what I mean? Like I think we forget because we're just here and we're going through the motions, but like you've got one shot at this. So I do this because Ben can't. I do this because, like my business partner, April, one of my business partners, her dad was in a hang gliding accident was when he was in his mid 30s and he became a quadriplegic. So when I don't feel like working out, I use that as inspiration because I'm like, he would kill to be able to put on a pair of shoes and run. So I do it because I can. And for those, and I feel like it's my obligation and responsibility to because I can. Does that make sense?
Totally. And once again, I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing. I mean, this is the type of stuff that people need to hear. I need to be reminded of it because you can. And that's a great reason. Super inspiring, Kelly. I absolutely love it. What does the business look like? Obviously this was a long time ago. What does the business look like now?
Yeah. So, I've and I think this is important.
Mhm.
So as a result of Ingenuity Advantage is the staffing firm I have that's focused on engineering recruitment.
Mhm.
And that's alive, thriving well. We have a team. I'm in the optimal situation where I've got a fantastic team that runs it. I've got an operations manager, recruiting managers, all of that. So I'm checking in, showing up for our weekly level 10 meeting that we have, part of the visionary for the business, but
Mhm.
I'm not as involved in the day to day. It's more, I vision and strategy that I support with on that. But as a result of Ingenuity Advantage, we had those customers who were mostly engineering design consult firms and saying, hey, can you help us find an executive assistant or a marketing manager? And so because we wanted to stay super niched and focused from a brand standpoint on engineering, we started another company called Advantage Consulting Group, which does professional placement. So it places for positions outside of the engineering space that are in the professional, so basically within the walls of an office.
Right.
And so that we would have our own brand to recruit under and all of that, and wouldn't muddy up the Ingenuity brand. So, that business started in, I think, 2013,
Mhm.
I think, or 14. And that's a 7-figure business now. We've got a team that runs that. And everybody's remote now, too, by the way. We have our physical location, and they go in one day a week to work together and everything. But COVID kind of shifted the way we do things. And so we've got people that are working from home that love it. And so they have the flexibility to work where they want. But and then as a result of this, so listening to your customers, this is, one of my, and whether you're in a job now, listening to what your customers are saying, because it could be your next great idea. It could be a way that you are able to transition out of your job and bring additional value that isn't being brought.
Mhm.
So listening to your customers is so important. So another thing that was happening and having conversations with these companies that were looking to hire, we do something that we call an in-depth study. So we learn all about their company and their culture and so companies that were having trouble finding talent or retaining talent, there was a common theme. And that theme was leadership issues. People don't leave companies, they leave leaders. And so as a result of that feedback and understanding and learning more and more that these companies needed support on the leadership side for leadership development, one of my passions is coaching, teaching, educating. And so one of the other brands that was born as a result of kind of listening to customers and is connected is a company called Absolute Advantage Leadership. And so we work with companies in helping, it's high performance training and development, and we help leaders and we do programs for their employees as well. And so that's one of my passions. I do the group coaching and everything, a couple of sessions a month with teams, but not necessarily anything I promote really heavily or anything. And that's just a passion project of mine.
So
And then,
many.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say so many good nuggets here, and I wrote it down and circled it. Listening to your customers, it could be your next great idea. That's tremendous. I just had to repeat that, and that's not just a business owner lesson. That's a life lesson, I think.
Absolutely.
I mean,
And
completely.
it's even if you're not quite ready to break away, from your W-2, but
Hmm.
you're looking to become kind of that linchpin employee, or, that individual that's bringing more value to their company because you're looking, maybe you want to get a pay increase, or if you're listening to your customers, um, you can become invaluable to your organization by, again, being able to identify additional value that you can bring to the customer. So yeah, I think that's one of the um, main lessons I've taken in each one of the businesses, because it's already kind of proof of concept, right? You've already done some of the research because you're hearing straight from people what their needs are,
Yeah.
and it was simply, a lot of this was asking. When we started Advantage Consulting Group, it was like, hey, if we added this arm, and started another business, but same ownership, same processes, systems for getting you quality candidates. Would you utilize that? And they were like, absolutely. So we started to kind of already build, what the model was going to be for growth through doing some of that foundational work. And the same thing with the leadership. It was like, hey, if I put together some programs to help develop your leaders and give them some of the basic foundational, would that be something you were interested in? And they were like, yeah. So it was like, okay. So it was, develop something and bring value in some way.
Sounds like a simple question to me that you're asking, and they're just telling you yes or no, or maybe they'll have a tweet. I also find it very ironic that you stepped away from from the staffing business, kind of like, the owners that you had left were doing. So you kind of repeated that. So I chuckled at that when you said that, but that's ultimately what the goal is, right? So, because you obviously have a passion to build businesses.
Yep. I working on businesses. I worked in the business for years,
Yeah.
and I think you have to work in the business to know, like, all of the, to build your processes, systems, to know the pain, associated with being in that role, who's going to be good in that role, who, like there's an important facet to working every aspect of your business if you're able to do that, especially when you're first starting out. But I didn't want, have you heard or read of the book E-Myth by Michael Gerber, I think it is?
I have it. I just haven't read it yet.
No, it's a good book for those that are listening right now that are interested in making that transition, because it talks about the difference between, like, when you're in a business and you're first starting out, a lot of the time you're in that technician role, because many of us take those talents and that we learned from our job, and we're just doing it somewhere else or doing it better somewhere else, for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that understanding, I didn't want to create a new job for myself. I wanted to, I looked at this as a way to, I love I love building businesses. I love developing people. And I like making money. And so, I
That part's
think,
nice.
exactly. That's a good part around it too. So, anyway.
No, wonderful. So let me ask you this. You work with a lot of, engineers and your businesses that have W-2 employees, and you're no longer one. You've been free of that for quite some time, but you're still surrounded by it. And we were talking a little bit offline about really how the mental piece is one of the biggest blocks for people. And maybe you could expand on that a little bit, because we weren't on record when we were talking about that, but people feel stuck in their positions. People feel maybe trapped by the steady paycheck, or again the fact that they have to have the conversation with their boss, or the fear of not being. I think for most people, the idea of not taking a paycheck for 12 months freaks them out. And
Yeah.
I had to go through that when I left my job. We were in that position, but it worked out, and you just have to have a plan for it. So maybe you could, share some insight there, because I know you definitely have some.
Yeah, no, I think I did have a plan for it. This wasn't something that, um, was something that wasn't well thought out. And this also wasn't something, like, I had a non-compete agreement, so I couldn't start to do this at, like, how there's side gigs and everything are a great way to start to make that transition, where you can work a full-time position and then be doing your thing on the side while it wasn't an option for me with this particular, so I had to do a cold cut like that.
Right.
But but I planned for it, from a financial standpoint, like, that was part of my, when I got that cold glass of water in my face, I thought, okay, I know myself. I'm a planner. I like to know what's going to happen. And so I'm like, how do I mitigate as much of this anxiety and fear that I have around, like, what are the things that I'm afraid of? And number one on my thing was money. It was not having a steady paycheck. So it was like, okay, so if that's my greatest fear, how do I help ease some of that anxiety around that? What's my plan? All right, well, I'm going to start squirreling away X amount of money from my paycheck each week going into my startup fund. My husband was part of the equation, and he's like, hey, I'll work a weekend, and throw some money into that. Like, it was something we were working toward together. So like I had, that was the number one fear for me, was that. And then the other fear was that, like, I can recruit in my sleep. I was super good at that job. I'd never been an entrepreneur before. And so I started to do some research, to learn, to get some books, this was before Audible. So to read some books on entrepreneurship, and just wrapping my head around it a little bit more. And so there was a plan that helped transition me to being able to make that move. And so that helped alleviate some of the fear for me, with actually doing it. But what we were talking about off, but prior to recording, Brian, was one of the businesses that I'm involved in is a company, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think, called Think It Be It, out of Austin, Texas. And one of the things that was game changing for me, and this was just 5 years ago, and I wish I'd known this much earlier in my life, was that, again, understanding the science and how your brain works, but 95% of your thoughts and actions each day happen unconsciously, meaning they happen without you even thinking about it. It's basically your autopilot. And what that is it is it's all of these patterns, and it's the old stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and why we do what we do. And it's some of that negative self-talk. Again, it's those unconscious, it's how you
Your
brush your teeth
downloads.
without even thinking about it too. Like, that autopilot is designed because if you didn't have it and you had to think about every single thing you did each day, like even blinking your eyes, or breathing, because that's what your brain's job is, you would be exhausted. It would be impossible to get through day. You wouldn't be able to get out your door each day. And so keeping in mind that that there's that 5% of your brain that actually is conscious. And it's the thing, it's like, when you, let's just use losing weight as an example, or your health, the idea to lose weight happens in the conscious brain. It's the intention that you have, but actually losing weight happens at the subconscious level. It is, it's your actions, and it happens at that subconscious level. So until you start to shift, those thoughts, and really take control of that autopilot, and it's almost impossible to make change, because you keep moving back into that default pattern. And so for me, I think that that mindset, like I want people that, like, to give yourself a little bit of a break, like, because your brain's doing its job. It's designed to be efficient. It's designed to keep you safe and in that comfort zone. So just remembering that. So when you see something come up and you make an excuse, see that for what it is. Oh, okay. I see what's going on here. You know what I mean? This is old. These are my old thought patterns and everything. And start asking yourself some questions. The first one I always ask is like, is that true? Is that really true? If I'm having a negative thought, like, oh, what if I lose everything? That was one of my thoughts. Well, if I don't have any money coming in, what happens if I lose everything? Well, first of all,
What if I don't?
What if I don't? You know what I mean? And would you ever let that happen? No. And again, planning for, I think, just taking those little incremental steps and beginning to plan and take daily action toward, and even if it's just little small incremental steps, you'll start to build that confidence and some of those new neural pathways where you're keeping promises and commitments to yourself. And before you know it, you'll be ready to make the move.
I love it. You could definitely rewire those downloads and change the way you think in your subconscious, but just like anything, you got to work at it. It's just not going to happen, because you want it to. You have to make the effort on a daily basis. What are some of the things that you do or you've done to, reprogram, if you will, so that you've learned to think differently. And number one, catch yourself. I think a lot of people just who have negative self-speak don't even realize it's happening.
Yep. So here's where it begins.
Mm-hmm.
And number one place it begins with is clarity. You've got to know what you want, who you need to be to get to get that,
Mm-hmm.
how the best version of you shows up to do that. Like, you need a lot of clarity around what it is that you want and why you want it. So that's number one. And I think here's I'm going to go on a little offshoot, and then I'm going to go back to your question here. This is important when you're looking at making this transition. Is it something that you're just interested in, or are you committed to making this change? Because there's a difference between those two. Committed is where, come hell or high water, any obstacle that comes up, you're going to find a way.
Yep.
Interested typically is, well, it would be great if I started my own business, but the first obstacle that comes up, or the first thing, the excuses start coming, and again, that's part of the way that your mind works. But I think you have to get clear about whether this is something you're just interested in, because it's too friggin' hard if you're just interested. You've got to be committed to this. And I'm not saying that to deter anybody. It's the best decision I've ever made, and I have a fabulous life as a result of what I've done. So I'm not doing, it's wonderful on the other side, but there's a real distinction that needs to be made between those two things, because it's hard. This isn't easy. So if you're just interested, go home. If this is something that you're serious about and that you really want, then commit to it and go all in and figure out a way to make it happen, and get really deeply connected to your why, so that when shit gets hard, because it does and it will, that you're like, okay, why am I doing this again? So that's important. So let me go back really quick, Brian, and answer your question about how to reprogram that subconscious.
Please.
Really, it's about, you've got to get that clarity, and then you've got to feed that clarity to yourself every single day. And so we've got what we call the Think It Be It 12-minute a day technique, and it's the top application of the top book in the world on success, Think and Grow Rich. And it is applying all those principles of Think and Grow Rich. It takes 12 minutes a day. And so for example, you just said a negative thought comes up. So part of what's in your GPS blueprint in this method is, when I have a negative thought, I immediately trigger to something I'm grateful for. That's one of the things that's in my visualization, is so that the moment now I read that every morning, I have retrained my brain to not spiral like I used to, because I was a worrywart. And boy, the pandemic really set that off for me again. And had I not had this method, that would have been really hard as a business owner, because we got kicked in the teeth in 2020, with the pandemic, and all of the businesses were severely impacted. Had I not had that technique, it would have been so difficult. But it's what can I control? I can control two things. I can control my thoughts, and I can control my actions. So, when I have a negative thought, I immediately trigger to something grateful. Now that happens automatically without thinking for me, because I read it every single morning. I actually don't read it anymore. I've recorded it. I change it every quarter. I've recorded it, and I listen to it in the first part of my warm up and my workout. And so it has rewired that worrywart in me to immediately trigger to something grateful, which bring me back here and present, because worry happens in the future. Being grateful happens right now and in this moment. And so I spent a lot of time in the future worrying, when 99% of the time, none of that would come to pass anyway. And it was just a huge waste of energy. So it's getting clarity. It's understanding what those behaviors are that are holding you back, figuring, what's the solution and what's the behavioral change that needs to happen. and then reading that every single day. Because what you're doing is it's that reticular activating system.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting that to work for you too. It starts, your brain wants to help you. It will start to bring things into your life that support your goals and that support the behavior that you're looking to change. The problem is, because so much of what we do happens subconsciously, that unless you're reminding yourself every single day, you go right back to the old way to do it, because that's what your brain is programmed to do. So you've got to have that clarity, and then every single day have those, statement. And again, if anybody's interested in this, they can reach out to me.
I was going to ask, does this exist? Because you're just crushing it right now. So this is all great stuff. So, yeah, is there a way to, is this a downloadable thing, or just, give the listeners some direction on that?
Yeah, well, go ahead and just email me. You can email me directly at Kelly, and I'm going to give you my Think It Be It one. So just Kelly, Kelly at thinkitbeit.com. And if you go there, you'll see that so much of it is focused on entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. That's who our main client base is. Most of you who are listening probably, again, maybe haven't made that transition yet, potentially. And so some of what you see there may feel like it doesn't apply to you, but email me. I'll have some resources that I'll send you that'll help get you kickstarted in doing some of this yourself. And I'm happy to, it's a passion of mine. Like, I love, it changed my life. Once I understood that, like, oh, because I used to lay in bed and like beat myself up and be like, you've got more gas in the tank. You have more to offer. Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you taking action? And now I know why. And it's not your fault. You're understanding the science behind how your brain works freed me up. And now you having the tools to then reprogram that part of my brain, then you do the stuff I do. Like, Brian, we met through real estate. Mm-hmm. And, so I'm just now getting into that. That's been a dream of mine to get into that. And now, like, part of my programming is that I make a minimum of 15 calls per day right now, because I have to build this business. It's the way, and at a minimum, I've got to be doing that. I've got to be doing the right things that are going to move the needle. And that's it right now. And that's one of my main goals I'm working on for this quarter. And but I remind myself of that every single day. It doesn't just happen. You have to have a lot of intention around this, or you won't do it. It's just the way your brain's designed.
I have full belief that you will be making the 15 every day. So, that's great. No, that very generous of you to leave your email. We'll certainly leave that in the show notes. And I would encourage everyone to take advantage of what has just been offered to you, because if you can reprogram your mindset is key. And Kelly mentioned something that has been super important for my life as well, which is the shift to gratitude. So, and that is a constant thing. I have negative thoughts every single day. I'm sure they come into your brain too. It does get hard, and gratitude practice has literally changed my life, just as it has yours as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Kelly, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share with everyone today?
Oh my gosh. I would just say that if you're somebody who's on the fence, and or it's always been a dream of yours to own your own business, or that, just start taking action. The first thing that you need to do is decide whether it's something you're interested in, or whether it's something that you really want and you want to commit to doing it. And once you do make that commitment, start taking those little incremental daily actions, and you'll be there before you know it. So it's worth every painful step. We talked a little bit about this too, Brian, which is just like, nothing good comes from just hanging out and staying in your comfort zone. You know what I mean? No. Like anything, you've got to challenge yourself to grow, and entrepreneurship is a lot of falling on your face. And so having the resilience and to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and be. I never look at anything. This will be my parting advice, and then I'll just let you guys get on with your day. You're any type of situation that arises, I don't look at anything as failure. And I have, by anybody's definition, failed more than most, because I look at it as an opportunity to grow. I'm like, what was I supposed to learn as a result of going through this? Okay. And that helped inform, my direction. And so I think that would be, don't be afraid to fail. Failure is where the gold is. It's what teaches you, and it's what helps you learn and take things to the next level. So just go for it. If it's on your mind, figure out a plan, do it, go for it, and don't be afraid to fail.
Beautiful. I ran out of of space on my page to write. So failure is golden. So, and you can't fail if you don't quit. I mean,
Yep.
that's the lesson as well. Kelly, thank you so much. This has been tremendous insight. I learned a lot. Like I said, I have no more room on my paper. Um, and I'm definitely going to invite you back on the show for sure. Everyone, make it a great day.